Minute until showtime. Show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right.
Blog Talk Radio.
There we go. All right, everybody, and welcome to the Yaron Brook show. I'm hearing that the video quality is not that great, so if it's not, let me know. There might be some things maybe I can do about it. Let's see, we can, let's quit that. Video quality, anybody on Facebook? How's the quality, video quality on Facebook? What does it look like? Okay. No comments. Come on, people. Somebody say it's good, it's bad, looks better now. Okay, let me just do a couple things here. What else can I shut down? Basically, the more I shut down, the better the quality, I think, will be. All right, I think I shut down a bunch of stuff. Slightly blurry, hopefully that won't be too, as long as it's not pixelated and freezing and screwing up. I think we're good. Looks like Netflix. All right, Gary Cooper. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining me tonight. Tonight is our monthly edition where I answer questions that you guys, those of you who support me on Patreon, voted for. So the question that got the most votes, because we're big on democracy here, the question that got the most votes rises to the top, and I answer it first, and then the second one and the third one, and so on. And basically until we run out of time. So we'll start from the top and move down. There were a lot of questions. A lot of questions were submitted this time, over 20 questions. So if you're interested in submitting a question, if you're interested in voting, then what you do have to do is become a patron of the Yaron Brook Show. You go to patreon.com, Yaron Brook Show, and you can suggest topics and you can vote on those topics on Patreon. Let me just note that last week I kind of challenged you guys to become patrons, patrons. And it worked great. I mean, the goal was by the end of this week to get to 400. Well, by the end of today, we're already at 407. So we exceeded the goal by 7 people. And so that's exciting. You guys, thank you. You guys responded. You guys came through. You stepped up, and we're at the goal that I set, which was 400. But of course, every goal is just a step towards a greater goal. And the greater goal is that we're still short $500 of our first kind of monetary level that makes all this happen, that, where I can actually spend the money and not spend my own money from my own pocket, but actually fund the podcast itself. So we need to get to $6,000 a month to get that going. We're at 5,500 basically. We need another $500. So it would be great if by the end of the week we got another $500. But it would be great if by the end of, I don't know, in a couple of weeks, before I leave the country, we get to 5,000, but we get to $6,000. So Looking for another $500 from you guys. That would be great. Please become patrons, support the show, allow us to expand and keep doing what we're doing and do more. I might even come back to you guys and ask for a lot more money, because ultimately, I think the goal here is for me to become completely independent of all other funding sources, and do my speaking, do everything just based on what makes sense, not just based on where I can find funding for it. So the Institute's commitment to what we're doing is shrinking, gonna go away. So the only way for me to continue doing this is ultimately for us to raise significant amounts of money. But let's get to 6,000 first, and then we'll talk about how to get to Jordan Peterson-like numbers. That's what we need to be. All right, let's see. 100,000 is too easy now. Yeah, we got to get to 100,000 subscribers on YouTube to get to Jordan Peterson-like levels. He's at what, 700,000, 800,000? I don't know. It's absurd how popular he is. It really is amazing. Good for him. All right, let's jump into the topics. Of course, if you're on YouTube and you want your question to rise up, I'm going to give the patrons, the Patreon votes, the first few questions, the priority. But if you want your question to be asked and answered on YouTube, you can use the super chat feature, and we can get to that. Yeah, I mean, Jordan Peterson has sold millions of his books. I mean, there's no way I am coming anywhere close to Jordan Peterson. It is what it is. This is life. All right. We can talk about why he is so successful and why I am not. Let's go to the first question. You can submit that question for next time, or you can submit it on YouTube. Morality of advertising. I was kind of surprised this got so many votes, but it did. It was the #1 voted question. All right. Morality of advertising. Is deceptive marketing wrong, morally and legally? So his explanation is a great amount of research is being done to study how human minds work and how to use cognitive biases, fallacies, and psychological weaknesses to trick people into buying things, joining causes, and so forth that aren't actually in their best interest. A classic example would be cigarette and alcohol ads. But today's example could be things like Twitter and Facebook that are designed to constantly keep people distracted and checking for more updates. Another would be the used car salesman type of sales tactics. Is this stuff wrong? And what is objectivist view on advertising? So first, let's start. I'm very pro advertising. Advertising at its best, advertising at its most effective, ultimately, is providing information to the consumer. And the more sophisticated, the more thoughtful, the more rational the consumer is, the better the advertising becomes. Because if the consumer is thoughtful and rational and really considering and takes into account context and is only going to buy something because he is rationally determined that this thing is a value, then the only role for advertising is to provide this thoughtful consumer with information about what he is about to consume, right? So, I'm a consumer of Apple products, of computers and iPhones and competitors and all kinds of gadgets on, monitors, and when I go and consume, I don't look at advertising beyond what, LG has a curved monitor. Let me look at that. But their advertising does not cause me to buy their monitor. I use it as a starting point. They have something that I might be interested in. And then I go and read reviews and read analysis and read all the different magazines and how they compare. And then I think about my needs. And then I go and I buy the monitor. I have 2 of them here. They're actually Samsung 42-inch widescreen curved monitors. So I have a little semicircle going on here. But I buy it based on rational evaluations of facts, facts that I might get an indication from advertising that they exist, but then based on research. People complain about the advertising on Facebook, but I find the advertising on Facebook often quite effective. So in my stream, I get these posts that look like posts, but they're really advertisements on things like, I don't know, I recently saw these headphones that look really intriguing. They're headphones that you wear in your sleep, and supposedly they measure your brain waves, and they provide sounds for you to fall asleep, and they know you when you're asleep, and they know when you're awake. And supposedly it helps with sleep, particularly if you're like me, traveling, right? You're on an airplane and you want to be quiet, and they look really comfortable. So first of all, I would have never known these headphones existed if not for the advertising. And that's what advertising is really good for. It's to let us know that these things exist and what they do. Then I went to the website and I started reading, and I did a little bit of research, and I'm not convinced yet. So I haven't bought them yet. When I buy them, I'll let you know what I think of them. But I haven't bought them yet because I'm not convinced, but I'm rationally thinking it through. So there's almost nothing that I buy that I think is a consequence of my cognitive biases or my psychological weaknesses. I'm really trying to think. I go into a store. I know what kind of snacks I like at the airport. So I know what kind of snacks I like, and that's what I look for. And if it's not what meets my criteria, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Andrew, thanks for the contribution. Thanks for the super chat question. I'm going to delay answering it only because I'm committed to doing these other questions first, but I am going to copy and paste it so that I don't lose it in the stream of the chat. And I promise I will get to it before the end of the show. But it's just not going to be one of the first 3 or 4 questions that I answer. So that's an irrational world. That's a rational consumer. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's anything I buy that is, I mean, look, I see ads for cars, right? Fast cars. I was just watching an ad for Mercedes-Benz, the E63 AMG, 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. And I turned to my wife and I said, that's the car I want, right? Now, I'm not going to go buy it. If I was going to buy it, which I'm not, because in Puerto Rico, the roads are not for 3.3 second 0 to 60 cars. It just doesn't fit. It would make no sense. But if I was going to buy it, I would, now I know that they have that Mercedes-Benz has this monster car that would be so much fun to drive. So I would go and test drive it. I would test drive an equivalent Audi, or test drive an equivalent BMW, or test drive other equivalent cars, and then I would buy the car that I really like. But the advertising let me know, whoa, there's this great car out there. And it appeals to I like fast cars. So it appeals to that within me that likes fast cars, but I'm not going to act on it, particularly not on a high priced item. So again, I think the question is always, who is the consumer? And in a rational world, in a laissez-faire capitalist world, the assumption is that most consumers are rational. They're not, it doesn't mean they have to be rational in every single aspect of their lives, but it means they're more rational than they are today. One of the reasons, the reason we do not have laissez-faire capitalism today is because people are not rational enough. If we got to a world of laissez-faire capitalism, people would be a lot more rational, particularly when it came to how they spend their money and their consumption, because that's the easiest area in life to be rational. That's much easier to be rational in your consumption behavior than it is to be rational about investment, for example, which is much tougher, or to be rational about politics, which is much, much, much tougher, right? So we start with that. We start with the fact that, people are saying fast cars look cool. Yeah, they look cool, but the reason I want a fast car has nothing to do with the way it looks. It feels cool to be going from 0 to 60 at 33.3 seconds. It feels cool to take those turns really, really fast. And and to be behind a machine that powerful and to be in control of a machine that powerful is just a great sensation. It's just a lot of fun. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge, right? It's a challenge not to drive it off the road. It's a challenge to anyway, I love driving. I love driving fast cars. I have a relatively, not a super fast car, a relatively fast car in California, an Audi S5, which is a pretty fast car. But and it takes corners great, and I love driving it, and it's a lot of fun. I miss it here in Puerto Rico. I miss having that kind of car. But again, I'm rational enough to know that you can't drive that car, right? You can't drive that kind of car here so now I'm really trying to think about things that I buy out of impulse, right? I can't really think of anything. And now I don't do most of the consumption in the house, but I really don't. Okay, but let's take the fact that we all know that there is such a thing as cognitive biases. There are psychological weaknesses. And look, companies' responsibility in a world in which consumers are not being rational is to get them to buy their product without lying, without committing fraud. So fraud is both unethical and immoral. Well, unethical is immoral, unethical and illegal. But trying to convince people to the best of your ability without forcing them, giving them the information, in a way that is going to stimulate their cognitive bias of fallacies, not fallacies, cognitive biases or psychological weaknesses. There's nothing wrong with that, given that that's who the consumer is, right? I wouldn't enjoy being involved in a company like that. Like I wouldn't have enjoyed running or being involved in a cigarette or an alcohol company. But there's absolutely every right, morally and legally, to talk about the pleasure you get from smoking. People do get pleasure from it. It's not lying. It's not cheating. It's not playing to cognitive biases. It's truth. Now, again, I do accept that most people today have cognitive biases. I'm sure I have cognitive biases, but they apply to the more difficult decisions, with me at least, right? I have to overcome them. Certainly in investing, we all have cognitive biases. And anytime there's uncertainty, that's where I find my cognitive bias is kicking in, and you really need to think about it. You really need to challenge yourself. But your cognitive biases are your responsibility. The fact that you're not thinking, using your mind fully, that you're not fully rational at any given point in time is your responsibility. In other words, it's your responsibility to fix it. It's your responsibility to overcome it. It's your responsibility to figure out what's good for you and what's not good for you. It's not the advertiser's responsibility. For some people, the pleasure of smoking outweighs the danger of cancer. And I think that's ridiculous, but it is for some people. It's not anybody's responsibility to make that choice for other people. Again, I wouldn't want to be involved in a product that I wouldn't consume. So I will only sell a product that I believe in, that I consume. This is why the product I sell is objectivism, because I believe in it. I consume it. I use it. I apply it in my own life. So no, I don't think there's any problem with it. Now, again, used car salesmen, are they lying? Are they manipulating you in ways that are equivalent to lying? Yeah, that's immoral. It might not be illegal, but it's immoral. I think it's immoral to be deceptive. And some advertising probably is deceptive. Now, I never understood advertising. A lot of advertising I just don't get. Like now I know some of you are going to get really upset at me now. There are like 100 types of beer, and they all use the same advertising methodology. Girls in bikinis on boats running around drinking beer, right? Now, what that has to do with the taste of beer, I have no idea. Why anybody likes beer, I have no idea. Why we need 55 different types of beer, I have no idea. In a rational world, would there be more beer or would there be less beer? I don't know. But in a rational world, I don't think there'd be quite as many bikini-clad women in beer commercials. Does that make sense? And there'd be more discussion about what makes this particular beer unique, other than the second-handed notion that if you drink this beer, you get bikini-clad babes chasing you. Does that make sense, right? So, in other words, there's a different, I think you have to approach advertising differently in a laissez-faire capitalist economy where people are basically rational. And today you do what sells, but that doesn't mean, and that's perfectly moral, but that doesn't mean you should do it. That doesn't mean you should work for that kind of marketing agency. That doesn't mean you should be engaged in that kind of advertising. That doesn't mean you should be engaged. Right? So, yeah, I mean, so people are saying, yes, it's all about sex. Yes, I mean, but that's again, a question is you don't have sex without thinking about it. So, what we need to argue against is not the marketing that appeals to sex, it's people's attitudes towards sex. And people's attitudes towards sex are wrong in America, particularly because of Christianity. I think sex is something hidden. It's something to be ashamed of. It's something under the table. So we have to overcompensate for it. We don't have a healthy adult relationship with sex. We can't talk about it. We can't discuss it. We can't think in terms of its true meaning, and therefore it cheapens it. We cheapen it as a way to overcome our guilt associated with it that Christianity and religion has taught us about. Religion, who knows what a culture would look like, what a cultural attitude towards sex would look like in a rational culture. We're so far removed from a rational approach to sex and the culture in which we live. Most of our culture is dominated by a Christian approach to sex and then overcompensation as a response to that. And so the non-Christians, they're advocates of promiscuity as a response to the conservatism, the repression of Christianity with regard to sex. So, the United States does not have less guilt towards sex than the rest of the world. Absolutely not. Quite the contrary. So I come from Israel. Israel has a much healthier attitude towards sex than America does. And Europe has a much healthier attitude towards sex. Secular cultures have a much healthier attitude towards sex than religious cultures, like the religious culture that dominates the United States. So at least that's my experience. And certainly that's true of Israel over the US. And that I have firsthand experiences. Europe, I'm less familiar with. So, the very fact that you can't show nudity on American television, that's bizarre, right? Just bizarre. Or we can have our kids play the most violent games possible, blood spewing all over the place, guts spilling out in every direction, and parents take their kids to see Terminator movies, and Terminator's nothing now. The most gratuitous violence possible. But, oh my God, you see one naked, piece of flesh and everybody's covering their eyes and running for the exits. This attitude has a completely sick view of the human body and of sex and nudity and all of it. So no, there's nothing healthy about our attitude. So it's really, anyway, how did we have sex with? Using sex for marketing. But if you're in marketing and you want to sell beer and you can exploit that lack of healthiness, then you got to do it. You got to do it. Right? So think about the wardrobe malfunctions, the Super Bowl and other places, and the hysteria of seeing a breast or nipple for a fraction of a second. And people went berserk over that, right? And I mean, that's Christianity for you. That doesn't come from any healthy attitude to again, a Greek attitude, a pagan attitude towards the human body. I think about Greece. You walked around in Athens and in Greece, and everywhere you went, there were sculptures of naked men and naked women, and you know, you know, if you look at some of the vases and some of the artwork, they're depicting sexual acts. There was no shame in sex. All right. So I think advertising is moral. I think the quality of the advertising and the effectiveness ultimately of the advertising as an appeal to a rational person would go up. Right now, I find most advertising, 99% of advertising, ineffectual because it's not appealing to the rational. And in a rational society, advertisers would have to appeal to the rational. But in a relatively irrational society, in a society in which people do make decisions based on whim, you have no choice. You'll be driven out of business if you do not play the game. Now, you know, some people would argue that, you know, the fact that I buy only Apple products or mostly Apple products is an indicate, you know, it's because they're cool. It's because I want to be cool. But, you know, I was buying Apple products before they were cool, way back when they were kind of sucked. Now, but I love, there's something about Apple that I really love, something about their approach to technology, their approach to operating systems, their approach to the end user that I've always loved, even before they were the epitome of sexiness. All right. So that's about advertising. If you have follow-up questions, send them in again. All right. Here's an interesting question. The root of sacrifice. So this is the question. Why has sacrifice been a part of human history from the very earliest civilizations? Perhaps the modern idea of sacrifice is less tangible or less obvious, but it is no less anti-life than the days when humans sacrificed very tangible pro-life things such as livestock, produce, or even other humans in the name of the gods. Is sacrifice all about some people wanting power over other people, or is there something else going on? So I think there are a couple of things here, and this is really interesting because it's an interesting topic. And I just read a story about a discovery, I guess in Latin America somewhere, I think from the Mayan civilization. I think they were the big sacrifices of like the bodies of 140 children who were sacrificed all in one day on an altar in this so-called civilization, right? You know, human sacrifice, it was a big part of many, many, many cultures. One of the great innovations of Judaism, of monotheism is the outlawing of human sacrifice. Although you could argue, you know, they practiced it in other forms. But the outlawing of outright human sacrifice, putting a human being on an altar and slitting their throat or gutting them or whatever they did. But ancient civilizations were filled with this kind of sacrifice. So let's try to think through why this would be. What is it about sacrifice, whether it's sacrifice of humans or Jews kept the sacrifice of livestock and of produce, and they were required once a year to bring a sacrifice to the temple. Now, certainly part of this is power. Part of this is it's a precursor to taxes, right? So you bring all this livestock and the produce to the temple, and of course God isn't going to eat it, but the priests sure are, and that's how the priests fund themselves. You bring gold to the temple to sacrifice, but who uses it? The priests and the powers to be, the king and the priests. So in some form, this is a way to justify taxation and to actually, you know, when it's material goods, to make it possible for the priest class and for the class of rulers to live by it. So a lot of it has to do with power, and with control, and with livelihood. I guess the livelihood of the ruling classes. It's more than just livelihood, of course, because it is about power. One of the ways in which you affect power over other people is to make it clear to them that they have to give up something precious, right? Whether it's their lives, and think about human sacrifice not just in terms of sacrificing on the altar, but think about all the wars that people have fought, all the wars that they've been convinced to fight for the tribe, for the race, for the group, for the village, for the some greater cause than themselves. When they got no benefit from the war, they got no advantage from it, but millions and hundreds of millions have died as a consequence of it. So think of the sacrifice that's involved in just going to war, the sacrifice of young people for that. But you've got to give something up for the group. And remember, altruism, in my view, is this, altruism is a moral system for controlling people. So if you're in the tribe, we want to make sure that you don't become an individualist. We don't want you going off and doing your own thing. We don't want the tribe to start trading among themselves and to discover their own power and their own efficacy. We want you to be dependent on your rulers. The rulers want you to stay dependent, and they probably learned the need to create mechanisms to make you dependent on them from the few individuals who probably stood up and who challenged them and who left the tribe, maybe the most productive, maybe the best hunters, the best producers, the best creators, left the tribe or tried to cause a rebellion within the tribe. So they learned that you have to control the people. And the way to control the people is to teach them that the only way they will be successful in life, the only way the tribe can succeed, is if they live for the tribe. If the tribe becomes their goal in life, that their lives are nothing, that their life is meaningless, and that all that matters is the group. And that the only way to know what the group wants, the only way to know what is good for the group is through the witch doctor and the political leader. The tribal leader will tell you, will teach you, will instruct you on what is good for the group. Hitler, it will channel the will of the Aryan people. Stalin will challenge the will of the proletarian. Same reasoning. Somebody has to know what's good for the tribe, and that person is going to have power. And then, in order to make the good of the tribe real, in order to make your subservience to the tribe real, in order to psychologically make it clear to you that you, in a sense, are nothing, that the tribe, the group, the leadership is everything, then you must sacrifice. You must sacrifice your goats, a certain percentage of your goats. You must sacrifice your food. But of course, the ultimate is you must sacrifice your child. You must sacrifice your own life. You must go to the front line and die for the sake of the tribe. The chieftain, certainly not, and certainly not the witch doctor are not going to be in the front line, but you must be on the front line. You must die for the sake of the group. So sacrifice in that sense is a way to put you in the place. It's a way to psychologically oppress you, to make it clear to you who's important and who's not, and you are not. Your stuff is not yours. Your stuff is the tribe's. Your life is not yours. Your life is the tribe's. Or, since you want to be able to really control people, your life belongs to God, the gods. And then it's the witch doctor who tells you what the gods want, and your life therefore belongs to the whim of the witch doctor. Now, why does that work? Right? Why do people accept that? I think people accept that, particularly in primitive societies, in ancient civilizations, because they needed an explanation. They needed to understand the world. They needed an explanation for how the world works. And religion provided them with what Ayn Rand called a primitive explanation. Religion is a primitive form of philosophy. It gave people an explanation of how the world works and what their role in the world is and what they should live for and how they should live. Now, of course, again, it's the powers to be, it's the witch doctor and the Attilas who decide what that moral code is and what you should live for and how you should live for it, right? And what you should do. So the sacrifices are always determined by them. But the reason that people go for it is because they need an explanation. So there is there is a drought. And the gods must be unhappy because there's no understanding of where rain comes from. There's no understanding what clouds, try to put yourself in the mindset of a truly primitive person who doesn't know what you knew in kindergarten. They don't know where rain comes from. They don't know what the clouds are. They don't understand gravity. They don't have any sense of any of this. Yet they need an explanation. And it's not raining. So the explanation is the gods are the explanation for everything ultimately. The gods must be unhappy. Well, how do we make the gods happy? We give them something. We have to give them something. And we try sacrificing goats and there's still a drought. And we try to give them fruits and harvest and all that, and there's still a drought. So what's the next most important thing we can give them to try to impact change? Well, we start sacrificing children and human beings. Well, and human beings, children are human beings, children and grown-ups. We start sacrificing human beings. And even if the drought doesn't end, well, now you've established that it's okay to sacrifice human beings. So sacrifice is a way it's been explained to people always, right? There's always an outcome. It's almost never the case that you're told, you need a sacrifice and you're going to get nothing in return. What is usually said is you need a sacrifice and what you'll get in return, you'll get in the afterlife, or you won't get anything in return, but the tribe will get something in return, or you won't get anything in return, but your children will get something in return. So you will die for them. Now, mysticism and mystical cultures use the fact that, that there is no, that you can invent anything, right? In order to convince people to sacrifice. But of course, again, the Nazis and the communists and collectivists do exactly the same thing. You must sacrifice so that there has to be an outcome. There has to be a reward. It might not be your reward, but there has to be something that comes back. And this is the confusion about sacrifice, right? This is why Jordan Peterson can talk about sacrifice as an investment. So Jordan Peterson, whenever he talks about sacrifice, not whenever, sometimes when he talks about sacrifice, this is why it's a package deal in his mind. Sometimes he talks about sacrifice as delayed gratification, investing today so you get more tomorrow. But other times he talks about sacrifice in the sense of Jesus sacrificing. You're dead, but it's for the good of mankind, or for your place in heaven, or for the rain to start. But notice that human beings are not so depraved. They're not so nuts, stupid, and irrational as to accept their own death for literally nothing. They have to believe there's a reward. They have to believe that there's going to be a benefit, whether to them or to the entity that they believe is more important than them for some reason, right? So sacrifice is embedded in us because of that, because for thousands of years, well, more than Christianity. Pre-Greek, Greece was a short period of relatively no brainwashing around sacrificing, and then on with Christianity. But for most of human history, for most of the tens of thousands of years that Homo sapiens have been around, we have been taught that there's something more important than your own life, And that therefore you should give up, be willing to give up your own life for this something that's more important than you. And that something that's more important than you has always held some element of rationality, like, of true value, if you will, like your kids and your family and your friends, and then extended to the tribe, right? The tribe is just an extended family and friends, but then extended beyond the tribe to the nation or to the race or to the proletarian or to the species. And it gets more and more diffused. But when it's your children, you have to die for your children. Okay, if that's really true, and I really love my children, okay, but okay, you have to die for the tribe because it'll rain if you die. Less believable, but still within the category of something and of an explanation, right? People need an explanation. So it's not raining because the God's upset at me and I have to die. So, I mean, I think, so sacrifice is all of that. And you can get it, you can understand it, you can see it in a pre-rational era, pre-Greece, pre-Enlightenment. When people are primitive, when people are barbaric, then it kind of gets it, right? You kind of get it. But once you discover reason, once you discover the efficaciousness of reason, once it's clear that all human beings have reason and can reason, then this kind of mentality is just strange. It really means that people are evading reason, evading their rational capacity, choosing not to think. And this is the great tragedy. This is the great tragedy of mankind that we're living through today, that so many people around us choose not to think, choose not to engage the rational faculty, choose not to reason, choose not to be the rational animal. And therefore still at the level of that barbarism, the pre-rational barbarism. And the sad thing today is that sacrifice still happens. It doesn't happen in terms of human sacrifice, at least not in civilized countries. And we don't sacrifice livestock, but we do sacrifice some of our produce. Certainly our livelihood is sacrificed. It's called taxes. And then we're guilted into giving even more to charity. And that's a form of sacrifice. And then we sacrifice for our families, and we expected to sacrifice for all these other groups. And again, the package deal, the confusion between delayed gratification, doing something and getting something more valuable in return versus doing something and getting something less valuable in return. That confusion helps those who advocate for sacrifice. So every time Jordan Peterson says sacrifice positively, and what he means is delayed gratification, he is adding to the confusion about the word, the concept, its meaning, its importance. And that makes our job 100 times more difficult as a consequence, right? To convince people that sacrifice is bad. Altruism, of course, is the real reason we have sacrifice. Altruism teaches us, and altruism is dominant in the culture. Even people who seemingly are not altruistic, they're not rationally self-interested, they're not altruistic. Altruistic in the sense that that is the standard of ethics. They're negating ethics, they're ignoring ethics, but they're ignoring the only standard they believe exists, which is altruism. Altruism means living for the sake of others. It means sacrifice. And again, people need guidance. People need morality. People need ethics. This is my big argument with economists and libertarians, is they think, oh, people always do what's in their self-interest. No, self-interest means something. My interests mean something. A lot of people just act based on whim. A lot of people sacrifice because they think that it's the right thing to do. It's not that they think it's in their long-term rational self-interest. They think it's the right thing to do. But what if it's not? But as long as altruism is dominant, as long as you believe that the right thing to do is for something greater than yourself, to quote John McCain, then sacrifice will be with us. And the more primitive a culture, the more it will sacrifice, the greater the sacrifice it will demand. The more mystical a culture, the greater the sacrifice it will demand. And here I include Nazism and communism and many of these as mystical cultures that replace God with another mystical entity called the proletarian, or another mystical entity called the Aryan race. And they demand massive. Mystical cultures demand the most sacrifice. And there's no way to measure, it's no way to tell whether the sacrifice is successful or not. Did you make it into heaven? Did you get to Valhalla? Did you get the 72 virgins? Oh, we know you didn't. But for that, you have to reject the mysticism. As long as you're within the framework of the mystic, you don't know. You don't know. All right. So we're, on the other hand, advocates of human self-interest. We're advocates for rational self-interest, not for whim worshiping, not for doing what you feel like, not for instant gratification, but for rational self-interest. Self-interest means rational, but self-interest also means long-term. That's what it means to be self-interested. It means to be long-term. So there is no such thing as short-term self-interest. There's only self-interest. And self-interest means taking into account in the context, the full long-term. So a lot of what Jordan Peterson talks about sacrifice are not sacrifices, they're investments, or they're delayed gratifications, or they're giving up something of little value for the sake of something of much greater value. So it's trading up on the hierarchy of values. But objectivism argues for self-interest. I see people here confused about this. Objectivism is not primarily a political philosophy. It's not primarily about force. It's not primarily about economics. It's not primarily about politics. It's primarily about morality. It's primarily about how you should live. A society of self-interested people is going to be a free society because that's in our self-interest. Not for some other reason. No, for the reason that it's the only society that, leaves individuals free to be moral, to pursue their self-interest. And it's the only kind of society that self-interested people want to live in, because self-interested people reject force because force is a rejection of the mind. And self-interested, if you're self-interested, the one thing you value more than everything else is the mind. Whoops, what happened there? A script in the extension there is causing Firefox to slow down. All right, well, let's do something about that. Sorry, guys, I'm going to take a short break here just to try to fix this quick problem that is happening here. Let's see if I can do it. That's weird. Fox, content. How do I get rid of that? All right, let's do this. All right, almost there, guys. Sorry. This will be a good time for a commercial break. All right, hopefully that'll help. All right, we're back. So a lot about sacrifice. I'm sure there's a lot more to say about sacrifice and what it means, but this package deal that Jordan Peterson is so prevalent in his thought is really, really dangerous. Okay. Let's see, somebody's telling me I can ignore the notifications, but I worry that the notifications mean that it's going to lead to slowing down. So if I can get rid of that piece of software that's causing it, I think that's usually a good thing. And generally, the fewer pieces of software I have running on this thing. Okay, we're going to take one more question, and then we're going to take the question I got on the super chat, and then we'll see if we have any time after that. All right. This is a question about corruption abound. Certification and accreditation for teachers and schools. The rationale for having a certification requirements for teachers and other jobs and the immorality of it. Additionally, talk about all things accreditation. Talk about all things accreditation of universities. What is it? Is it good or bad? Okay. So this whole idea of certificates, of having to get accredited, licensing laws, the whole idea that the state, that the government, that other people who are not your customers or consumers or interacting with you can tell you what profession you can or cannot go into, but can more than that, can dictate to you what the terms by which you getting into that profession have to be. Now, so for example, teachers in the United States have to get a teacher certificate at the teaching college. I think Leonard Peikoff says, if you want to do one thing for the sake of freedom in America, for the sake of, I think Brad Thompson also echoed this, for the sake of the minds of students in America, then get rid of teacher colleges. I mean, why can't, if somebody's really good at math and has a knack, an ability to explain it really well, like on the Khan Academy. Remember the Khan Academy where you would do it on the blackboard, right? And they don't have a teacher certificate. They never went to school. Maybe that's why they can explain it well. Why can't a school hire them? That is incredibly immoral. It's wrong. You've got somebody who's qualified, but the state has determined arbitrary qualifications that exclude him. Now, that is a form of fascism, of control. It limits human ability and human potential. People are less likely to go into particular fields that interest them because they're now barriers to entry. I mean, talk about poor people who have to pay to get a license to shampoo hair. Talk about the immorality of restricting their ability to rise up by restricting their ability to get a job, to get a profession. Because some bureaucrat decided that he gets to design the exam for who gets to shampoo hair and who not. I mean, it's nuts. It's anti-life. That's why it's immoral. And this is most important in education. Now, in a 100% private educational system, would there be certifications of schools, for example? Yeah, I think there'd be private companies that would go in and say, you know, the school is a real Montessori school based on our parameters. And then there'd be competitors who would have different parameters, and they would rate schools and they would test schools and they would provide information. So there would be certification that provided information, and the same would be true of private universities. There would be organizations that develop, but there would be competition. There would be a marketplace. There would be no government restrictions. There would be no government mandate that these certifications exist, or that you not run a college or university without such a. The market would determine all that. And private schools could choose to only hire teachers who had master's degrees, PhDs. Or they could choose to hire the most qualified teachers based on how good they were. So teachers could actually choose, schools, private schools, could actually choose what their specific criteria were for hiring somebody. That would be how hiring decisions got made. And again, it would be all competitive. But now the government tells a private school who they can and cannot hire. None of their business. There's no protection of individual rights here. There's no function of government that justifies the government telling us who can be a teacher and who can be a teacher. Note that the only reason it exists today is because of government schools. The government has basically, not totally, but basically a monopoly over schools. It gets to dictate who can be a teacher. It's in cahoots with the teachers union to keep good teachers out, to keep competition out. The teachers union doesn't want schools to just hire the best people. The teachers union wants schools to hire what? People who are being screened by the teachers union. And that's basically what the government school, what the teaching certificate is. It's a screen. It's a limitation on the number, a limitation on the quality, and it's to make sure that nobody's going to come in and challenge the status quo too badly. So it's a power grab. Now, I mean, think about this even for doctors. I'm against licensing of doctors by the state. Now, does that mean anybody could hang up a shingle saying I'm a doctor? Well, I mean, if that were happen, then the word doctor would mean nothing. You would only be able to hang up a shingle saying you're a doctor if you qualified as a doctor, which means you had the right degrees. And then you would have to prove to your customers that those degrees were real. You would have to prove to your customers that you are qualified to be a doctor, or qualified to be a nurse, or qualified to be a computer programmer. Notice that there's no licensing requirement for computer programming, which is, again, one of the reasons why there's innovation in technology. I mean, computer programming, these programmers, these little programmers, I mean, man, they have so much power. They get to program nuclear power plants, airplanes. They get to program, the electric grid. They get to program, the little robots that go inside your body in surgery. They get to program all these things. If they make a mistake, lots and lots and lots of people will die. We need the government to license them. We need the government to control this profession. This profession is run amok. We've got all these people wielding power over us through their ability to program who could kill everybody, and they don't. And the government's not monitoring it. I mean, isn't it amazing? And isn't it amazing that this is the one field in which we get real competition and real collaboration and real innovation? Doctors should be treated like programmers. When you go for a job interview at Google, they want to see if you graduated. If you didn't graduate from some college or some university, then what are your skills? Show us a program you've written. Show us what you can do. And doctors would have to convince their clients, their patients, by one means or another. And again, you'd probably get certification organization. You'd probably get an organization that said, we pre-qualify doctors. And there'll probably be a few of them, and they'd compete, and doctors would get a rating and a certificate, and you as a consumer would have to educate yourself and what was a good organization, what was a bad organization, who are good doctors, who are bad doctors. And you would have to be responsible for your own consumption choices, for your own healthcare choices, for all your choices that you make. What a thought. The individual being responsible for the choices that they make. But for that, you have to be rational. For that, we have to get to a culture of reason, a culture of rationality. It goes back to the marketing question, a culture where people are thinking for themselves. As long as people are not thinking for themselves, we can't get a culture like that. So, it's not even that we're not about politics and economics, we're about ethics. We're really about epistemology. We're really about getting people to think, use their minds, and to do it properly. And to recognize that maybe they've got biases and maybe they're tempted by emotions sometimes, and control them, and think, and use logic, use the tools that they have. So it really is the whole idea of the government doing it makes us dumb consumers. It encourages us not to think. It encourages us to just go see a doctor because the government approved him. It must be okay. Go see an investment advisor because the government has approved him. He must be okay. Send my kids to school because the school's been approved by the government, so it must be okay. It dumbs us all down. It makes us all stupid. And this is the culture we live in. We live in a culture that's dumbed down. We live in a culture where people don't take responsibility for their own choices, are not encouraged to think for themselves, are not encouraged to use their mind and evaluate the world and make choices and values for themselves. The government has done it for us. We don't need to think for ourselves. All right. By the way, share the videos. Share. Really good. That really helps. That's how we get the subscribers up. All right. Wow, we've done some heady topics. Heady topics. I mean, there's a ton you could say about certification and accreditation, but again, every level they're immoral. They're immoral in the message they send us. They're immoral in the restrictions they place on people who are trying to become teachers. They're immoral in that they're using force. They're using government force in order to restrict our choices in the world out there. All right, we're at an hour. Let me take this question from the super chat, because if you ask a super chat question, I guarantee I will answer it. Now's your chance. Go for the super chat. And the more money you put in the super chat, the more likely I am to answer the question, because I'm self-interested. I like the money. All right. It's a question about how government raises money. If contributions are to be voluntary, what prevents politicians from naturally being loyal to the large contributors rather than the idea of individual rights? Well, I mean, what prevents them is, you can construct the government to make it preventable in the sense that you create a division of powers. You have a constitution that limits what they can do. You have a constitution that says you can only protect individual rights, and if you sway from that, you're impeached. You have a differentiation, which we don't have today, between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judiciary branch. You have a robust government and a robust constitution to try to protect you, to try to assure that the government's job is to protect individual rights. However, at the end of the day, no system can withstand the people not believing in it anymore. No system is better than the people who live under it, at least not in the very long term. So what will prevent politicians from doing this? The politicians' own integrity, the fact that the people will be really, really upset at them and may vote them out of power. And how about the fact that the large contributors, it's in their rational self-interest more than anybody else's natural rational self-interest. It's in everybody's, but theirs in particular, not to have that happen. Because we know if you benefited from capitalism, again, imagine this is a world. People are voluntarily paying for government. We've already won. So this isn't the businessmen of today. This isn't Zuckerberg and Gates and all these guilt-ridden, pathetic businessmen. Here, heroic in one realm, pathetic in the other. These are real giants. Why would they want government favors? Why would they want their self-esteem to be diminished by getting government favors? Wouldn't they be the biggest champions of a government that protects individual rights and protects individual rights alone because that's how they made it? And that's the kind of world they want to live in? I mean, it boggles, think about what kind of world we would have there. And I know it's hard, but don't take the people that exist in this world and just plonk them into that world. That won't work. That's why you can't impose laissez-faire capitalism as a dictator. The people in the society would not want special favors, particularly the most successful in the society. They won't want special favors. They don't want to be cronies. They want to stand on their own 2 feet. They want to have the self-esteem of a giant, which is what they would have and what they would deserve. in what the political system, in a sense, recognizes and supports and makes possible and nourishes and allows to flourish. So the thing that prevents politicians, and I don't think from naturally being loyal, I don't think there's a naturally there. Again, this is not the world we live in today. These are not the sleazy little politicians who are interested in second-handed and sucking up to the people with money and sucking up to people. No, these are, many of them are legal thinkers who are interested in government because of the challenge that it poses. How you define clearly and unambiguously the property rights, how you apply them in new areas. What do you do about privacy and how do you structure it? It's people who go into government because it's a challenge for them. It's exciting, it's interesting. Not because they want to manipulate other people, but because they want to get it right. They want to apply individual rights right, which is not easy. Not easy. So the politicians would not naturally want to be loyal. They would naturally not want to be loyal. They would naturally be people who want to protect individual rights because they would be people who understood the extent to which natural rights has benefited themselves and the people they love and the world. Again, the problem is we export the people we live in with today into this ideal society of the future, and that doesn't work. The people we live in the world today have to change in dramatic ways before that world that we imagine can happen. All right. I think that is a good place to end today's show. I've been told my shows are too long, so I'm trying to keep them around an hour. I'm going to try to be back in the next few days. I'll be on the road, but I think I'll have time late in the evening to do shows. I'll be in Chicago time. By the way, if you're in Chicago, if you have friends in Chicago, if you know people in Chicago, then let them know about the event on Wednesday night with Dave Rubin and myself that's going to happen at the University of Illinois, Chicago. If you go to my Facebook page, there's an event there that you can find. And please, if you have friends who live in Chicago, Facebook friends, not real friends, Facebook friends, they go to my Facebook page and share the event because I think they'll enjoy it. And you know, I always get this about a week after I do an event, when the video comes out or something happens, people go, "Oh, I didn't know about that. I was right there. Like somebody just wrote me from Tbilisi." It's like, I can't believe you're in Tbilisi and I didn't know. You know why you didn't know? Because you guys didn't share the event. If all of you shared all of these events and all your friends, who are, many of them are my friends as well, would get it. You see, if only I post it, like 1,000 people out of my almost 40,000 followers see it. But if you start sharing it, then a larger and larger and larger number of people who follow me who might be interested in this actually get to see it. Now, I buy some advertising on top of that. So all of these events, I put my own money or the Patreon money that you help me with into advertising to let people know that these events are happening. But the easier way, the cheaper way, and the more effective way is for you to share the events. So go to Facebook, go to my page on Facebook, find the event. This one is 2 days in Chicago. It's going to be terrific. You guys should come. You can ask questions. You can meet Dave Rubin. You can meet me. It's going to be a lot of fun. Do it. Do it. All right. I know the meeting is requested for 2 hours because I like to have the flexibility of going long, but the 2 reasons I'm cutting it down to an hour. One is I've been told the videos are too long and they need to cut them back. Second, the Celtics are playing right now in the playoffs, and I've already missed an hour of the game. I don't know what the score is, and I want to go find out, and I want to go watch the rest of the game. So I'm being a little selfish here, egoistic, but those of you sports fans understand. As I said, I'll be doing a lot more shows this week, so don't worry. We'll cover a lot more topics. I'll try to get to some of the other questions from the Patreon list in some of the shows I do later in the week. Those of you who want me to comment on Iran and on Netanyahu's comments on Iran, I will be doing that in the next day or two, and you'll be getting a lot more. No shortage of Yaron Brook videos, no shortage of me chatting in front of you. All right, a few things to remind you. Patreon, need your support. Appreciate your support. Thank you for all of those who got me up above 400. Now we need to go to 500 and we need to go to $6,000, which means $500 in the next 2 weeks. We need a raise. So please help me do that. Patreon also allows you to ask questions and to vote on which questions I get to answer. And finally, subscribe to YouTube. A lot of people watch the show live on YouTube. I hope you all subscribe. Those of you watching the show later on, please subscribe. About half the people who watch my videos are not subscribers. Subscribe. We need to get to 100,000. All right, guys, let's hope Celtics win. Talk to you later this week. Bye.